Maker, Defender, Redeemer, and Friend.
I appreciate the opportunity to get to speak here once again, and I appreciate all the support you gave me and the continued support you give me here at this congregation. It's been a long time since I last wore a suit coat 2 days in a row. It's been 9 months, so that streak has been broken. What is bothering you right now? In our life, sometimes there are things which cause us to be stressed out. Sometimes it is the heavy workload which all needs to be completed, as was the case being a student at Southwest School of Bible Studies, or any preaching school really. Sometimes that heavy workload will really stress you out. Sometimes you're worried about someone's health and the fear of possibly losing that someone. And sometimes it's our own personal struggles, personal depressions, personal issues that we have. However, imagine all the problems in the world were caused by one individual, one being, and you had the chance to defeat this person. As Christians, we do, against the one causing all the stress, discouragement, and sufferings in our life. This individual is, of course, the devil himself, or Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, whatever you want to call him. Whatever the case is, he is the one behind all the problems and all the darkness that we see in our world today. In order to get a better understanding of him, we need to see his character, his conflict, and his consequences, which helps us better be able to know who he is and how to resist them, as James chapter 4, verse 7 says. The devil is the reason behind all the evil of this world, so we must always beware of him so we are not one of his victims. And we are first going to check out his character, and we are first introduced to him in Genesis chapter 3. And in Genesis chapter 3, we find he's very crafty, and he appears in this text as a serpent. We see here Eve told to eat of the tree which God had previously told her not to eat, her and Adam. However, this serpent causes Eve to eat it anyways, as she does not know any better, and this makes her and Adam get in big trouble with God. This would be like if someone tried to introduce a practice forbidden in the Bible into the Lord's church, and their excuse will be they say how someone else told them it was okay to bring this into the church. However, it really was not, because it was not done by the right authority. The devil loves to usurp authority as his own. However, the Lord needs to be the only one who we submit to. We do not listen to strangers. We need to be careful. Kids are told, do not talk to strangers. And that is the exact lesson that Eve's mistake here teaches us. And after this, it caused the fall of man. And this is when sin entered the world, was through this sin. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 tells us that he is like a roaring lion. We see here in this verse, he walks around seeking whoever he may devour. And this is like a lion which will often walk around the field looking for any animals which might be his prey. The devil hunts faithful Christians as his prey. The verse tells us to be sober and vigilant because of this. And we need to always be aware and alert when it comes to our everyday lives for anything which may be entrapping us in Satan's clutches, because Satan is always trying to find ways to get you. He's very sneaky, and we need to watch out. He is a tempting machine, and Matthew chapter 4 shows us the extent of the temptations he could do. We saw a glimpse of this temptation first whenever the snake, when he appeared as a snake, tempting Eve. However, if you think that you're safe from temptation because you think you are too faithful, you're wrong, because even Jesus, who is deity, even the Son of God himself was tempted. In this text, Satan tempts Jesus. He tempts Jesus several different times. 3 times. He first asked him to turn stones into bread. This was in verses 2 through 4 of Matthew chapter 4, he was hungry, but he was supposed to be fasting. So he could not eat at this particular time. And then he is told in the next set of verses 5 through 7, to jump off the temple because the angels would catch him. And finally, in verses 8 through 10, they're told to worship him, and he will gain the whole world. Jesus is told by Satan for Jesus to worship Satan, and Jesus had a scriptural answer for all of these. Whenever we face temptations in our lives, consult the Bible. Maybe try to search your Bible for the topic you are struggling with, which Satan might be trying to sway you through. After all, John 8:44 says he is the father of lies. So he can plant these lies in your head to get you to believe that doing what is wrong, get you to think it's okay. And he communicates this not only through our own personal feelings and desires, but through people of the world. People of the world will tell us all these sins are wrong or are right, and we need to know that they are wrong. And finally, we see his destructive nature. He can wipe out very many. And this comes to us in the book of Job, in chapter 1, verses 7 through 22, and then chapter 2, verse 7, list off how destructive Satan is, how much damage he did to Job's family and himself. We see how Satan directly targets Job, and he can do a lot of damage. First, his livestock and his servants. Then, his children were inside the same building all together, and that building collapsed, and just like that, they were gone. And then finally, a great and terrible sickness of boils got him. And Job chapter 2, verse 7 says, "So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head to toe, covered in boils." And just like that, a man who once was living great, someone who was well off, living a great life, was at his breaking point. He had hit rock bottom, all by the power, all just by a couple of moves of this evil being. He then didn't stop there. If you continue reading the book of Job, you will see he planted wickedness in Job's friends, destroying him on the inside. While he had just been destroyed on the outside with his life, his friends are now discouraging him. And then we also see secondhand damage he does. So Job was direct damage that he did, physical damage. But he also causes chain reactions, slippery slopes to happen through sin. We see the slippery slope, which begins in Numbers 13, verse 14, when the children of Israel complained because they did not like the land, the promised land. We see how this whole nation's complaining forced them into a 40-year wilderness walk. And what happened during that 40-year wilderness walk? Well, many things, but what I want to focus on, Numbers chapter 20, Moses disobeys. And because of that, just like that, now Moses cannot enter the promised land, as alongside everyone in that nation of a certain age and older. This caused many problems down the line from Israel, and the next generation inherits it. However, once again, Satan's lies through the world they lived in caused them to not wipe out the entirety of the land. And therefore, because of this, it causes a long cycle of misbehavior, and then some kings, most of which were not good. There were some good ones, such as David, but then you also had bad ones, such as Ahab. And this ends up in the end of the book of 2 Kings, chapter 24 and 25. The entirety of Judah taken into captivity. And the whole city of Jerusalem, this beautiful temple, which was built by Solomon, and all of this great city would end up destroyed, all because of the sin which Israel had began to inherit from the world around them, from Satan's influence of the world around the Israelites who had inherited the kingdom, and now because of this poor influence, they were sinning, and it would never stop, and it ultimately ended up in the destruction of this great nation and land, and it caused them to be in captivity with Babylon, and that was the first destruction of Jerusalem. Next, we're going to look at his conflict, his war, and his conflict is with God. It is the battle. There are two sides. We're either on God's side or we're on Satan's side. And it is a constant battle which we must fight till the end. As we've seen earlier from Matthew chapter 4, he went straight for Jesus, who he is directly against. We also see in Matthew 16:23, a lot of times in movies, people will sometimes portray their shortcomings. They will associate it with someone who they consider as their enemy. And so Jesus then knows who his enemy is. He knows his enemy. And so in Matthew chapter 16, verse 23, he says, "But he turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan.'" So we see that he calls him Satan because he knows that what Peter is doing, Peter's rebuke, is not coming from the good part of Peter. Peter knows better. He knows that this comes from Satan. And it shows how Satan is the one who is in direct conflict with our Lord Jesus Christ. He knows the man who is the tempter. He knows that the tempter is Satan, showing how Satan really goes right after deity himself. And he attacks the church too. He goes after faithful, strong members. And he wants to make the biggest casualty he can make. If you've ever seen a congregation close its doors or maybe split, that's the work of Satan. And he likes seeing these things happen. He wants to make a huge casualty. And he uses these tactics, these tempting tactics, to add people to his side. But we need to read Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11. We need to equip ourselves properly, which says, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." And the armor listed is what we use in battle as Christians against Satan. This protects us from any potential danger that he sends our way through sin and temptation, and many do succumb to his bait. And Ananias and Sapphira were two of them, from Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. And in this verse, and in this section, we read a story about how Ananias and Sapphira were baited by the temptation of their own greed, which was caused by Satan. Satan made them really greedy, and they really wanted to keep a little bit of what they claimed they were giving. They claimed that this land was all theirs. However, it was not all of theirs. They had kept a little bit back for themselves. And this resulted in their deaths, and it resulted in a church-wide fear, because verse 11 of Acts chapter 5 says, "So great fear came upon all the church and upon all those who heard these things." And this church-wide fear is probably exactly what Satan was hoping for. He wants to make the church weaker, because whenever you are more scared to do something, when you are more frightened of something, you are less likely to be at your fullest, because you are weak, or you're not going to be as strong. And so therefore the church cannot be as strong if there's a great fear upon the Lord's church. And we should hope this never happens to us as a church. This should never happen to the Midtown Church of Christ or any congregation of the Lord's church. And Judas was another one who let the greedy temptation of a high reward get the better of him to betray Jesus. In Matthew chapter 26, verses 14 through 16, which I'm going to read this. It says, "Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. So Satan, or Judas, through Satan, he let Satan give him the idea. He loved letting the material desires become more appealing to him than spiritual ones, which is why he is so effective in our world today, is because he always gives us the low-hanging fruit of temptations in our lives. But we need to learn to say no to this. James chapter 4, verse 7 says to submit to God and resist the devil. We need to take God's side. As long as we are constantly living in spirit and in truth, then the devil will always it'll always be harder for him on ways to get us. He is always having to find harder ways to get to us until eventually he just cannot get to us anymore because we are constantly remaining strong. However, we always must stand guard. We cannot let ourselves get too overconfident because he is never going to go away, but as long as we stay faithful, he will be able to constantly stay away and stay out of our lives. And if we do this, his tactics will become ineffective to us, which is the goal of the armor of God, to protect us. These different things protect our spiritual body from the worldliness. And unfortunately, when it comes to this battle of God versus the devil, most are on his side due to the nature of the world we live in and the effectiveness of Satan's temptations today. However, this was foretold by Jesus when he talked about the narrow way in Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. We need to still be standing when our war with Satan and the world is over. We need to be on God's side, because if we do anything that puts us against God, then we are not on God's side. And there are only two sides, which means we are on Satan's side. There's no middle ground. It's either you're one side or the other. And we need to be on God's side if we want to achieve this great reward, and we need to make sure we enter through the narrow way. Finally, let's look at his consequences. And the consequences begin back in Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis chapter 3, he was cursed more than all else. And his head was bruised, while the humans only had their heel bruised. This was verse 14. He says, "You are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field." And so we see here that he is cursed and that his head is going to be bruised, while humans get the heel bruise. Which injury is worse? The head. A head injury is probably the worst injury you can have because it can pose a risk to your brain. And this symbolizes how Satan, as well as any who affiliate with the sin he makes, will get the worst punishment possible, just like how Satan got the worst possible injury that he could have gotten, which we know today the worst punishment possible is eternal death, which is described in Revelation. So crossing our entire Bibles from the third chapter to the third to last chapter of the Bible, we look at Revelation chapter 20 and verse 10, which says that he will be cast in the lake of fire. So it says, "The devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever." So we see here he is cast into the lake of fire, where he will be with alongside all those who foolishly let him take over all their lives. All the people who have ever sinned are going to be there. All the people who have sinned but then not let themselves be washed in the blood, maybe not repented or not changed their lives from the sin, because all have sinned, but we need to realize that our sins can be washed away. These are people who decide they are not going to do anything about the sin is in their lives, and those people are going to be there. Not only this, but if you fall victim to Satan, you will go to this lake of fire where Satan is. All other people who were wicked in the world, Think of some of the most evil people who have ever existed on this earth, some of the most evil leaders who have done some terrible things, unimaginable, cruel, awful things. They will all be there. Most likely they will be there. A lot of them ended their lives in a sinful state, very sinful. And if that isn't bad enough, not only are all these terrible people, all these terrible individuals going to be there, it will be eternal torment and torture for every second forever. Think about that. Think about seeing someone who is your worst enemy, someone who makes fun of you, calls you all sorts of terrible things, and is just a mean person. Not only that, you are being constantly tortured in agonizing fire the whole time. So how do we avoid this? We need to make sure we do not let Satan's temptations get the better of us. Revelation chapter 2, verse 10 says that there will be trials and temptations caused by Satan. He's going to throw things at us, as that verse says, but if we can overcome them, then we are able to overcome Satan and we will obtain that crown of life. It is a constant battle. We always must fight. We must never take a day off of this battle. It's a battle we are fighting every single day. No matter what he takes from us, he took away almost everything from Job. He took a lot of things away from Job. Much of his wealth, his animals, his kids, and his health. However, Job still stuck it out. He also lost his friends, but he still stuck it out even through their discouragement, even through their tricky words which they were telling him, you should never, ever worship this God again because you clearly have done something wrong. You are bad. You are the problem. But God is not the problem. Satan is the problem. Our sin is the problem. And we always need to stick it out against Satan no matter what he takes from us. As long as he doesn't take away our devotion to God, we can have confidence over the Lord's victory over the greatest enemy who has ever existed. And he could take anything from us. And he could take all you want. He can do what he took away from Job. He can take away from us what he took from Job, but we need to make sure to never, ever let him take away our faithfulness to God. The devil is ultimately our greatest adversary. He is relentless, careless, and has unfortunately taken most of the world with him, and he's going to take most of the world down with him to hell. And as such, we must resist him and submit to God instead, as James chapter 4, verse 7 says. And doing this can help strengthen our faith in God. After all, the easiest victims are those who are the most unaware. He uses everything in our lives as an opportunity to take us. A lot of times it's our hobbies. Sometimes he'll use our hobbies to take away. We may say, I have this event I really want to go to, but it's on a Sunday morning. And just like that, he's taken you, because on Sunday mornings, there's one place where we all need to be. And he uses these little things to try to take us away from God. And there are many temptations and trials which are going to come to us thanks to him. And they are going to continue coming to us as long as we are here on this earth. And if we are not careful, then we can be right there with those who have fallen to his temptations and his sinfulness and the darkness of his temptations. We need to be able to see his character and how evil of a personality is and what he can do. Realizing this, we then need to see how he is in a battle with God and make sure to look at what side we are on. Are we on God's side or are we not? Make sure we are on God's side. Finally, we see how he will get his consequence alongside all those who have fallen victim to him in eternal fire. Of course, they are those who are not saved. Because of this, we need to make sure we are saved. Make sure you have assurance and God, you may think, oh, I'm saved. Yeah, I'm living a faithful life. I'm going to church every day. I'm worshiping. I'm reading the Bible. We may need to take a closer look at our lives, what we are doing in our everyday actions. Is this what God wants me to do? Everything you do, think of it as, does God want me doing this? Don't let a clueless, what you may think is a little sin, be what causes the devil to get you. Stand strong and be faithful as long as you are here on this earth. If you are not faithful, if you are not a Christian, if you are not yet saved, then there's an opportunity tonight for you to become a Christian. And if you are looking at your life and recognizing that Satan has gotten the better of you and you need some encouragement because Satan has discouraged you, then whatever it may be, that there are plenty of us here who can help you out. The devil may be in your life and you don't even know it. Stand as we sing.